everyone, this is Molly, and I'm joining today to do a solo episode about what it means to be a good neighbor and to really think about how our actions can contribute to the fabric of our community. Being neighborly and loving everyone for our shared humanity is really at the root of the stories that I'm aiming to tell, to share that we all have a valuable story. We just have to dig a little deeper to get to know the people around us in our circles. A lot of you know that I was born in Honolulu, but I grew up in Minneapolis. And with Minneapolis in the news so much lately, there's just been this real heaviness. This heaviness that my family is feeling, my friends are feeling, that the country is feeling. And I wanted to just have this space to work through some of the thoughts and stories that have come forward, but to do so in a productive and positive way that's not so headline news focused, but rather thinking through how our actions can actually uplift our communities. This past week, I received a newsletter. I'm on Esther Perel's email distribution list. I imagine many of you know who Esther Perel is. She's this incredible relationship psychologist, and she wrote a reflection on the people of Minneapolis, ICE, and her father's definition of a good neighbor. And I just loved it so much. I've been thinking about it the last 3 days, and I just wanted to read a portion of it because I think it really touches on the core of what I'm trying to convey. She wrote, "Once, during a visit to Poland with my parents, we went to my father's village. His old neighbors came to greet us. I remember him saying that, though they were not close, they were good neighbors. Curious, I asked him what made them good. His response was short. They were the ones who would knock at our doors to warn us every time the Germans were conducting a raid. Too often in our contemporary society, neighbors are strangers to each other, and yet when crisis comes, neighbors still seem to have the ethical impulse my father was describing." And to me, this is really what I would love to be doing with this podcast, is cultivating empathy for our neighbors. We may not know their stories, we may not know their childhoods or their jobs or their families, but we can watch out for each other. I have family members who live in St. Paul, Minneapolis, in the suburbs, who are buying and delivering groceries for their neighbors who are housebound. They're not working because they don't feel safe enough to go to work. My family and my friends who are really stepping up and watching out for their neighbors are doing so because that's just human decency. That's what you do when you love each other, even if you don't know each other. For us that aren't necessarily living in the Midwest right now, but we're seeing it on the news, things land a little differently when you see your neighbors being dragged out of their homes or their cars. You may not know them well, but when you see it happening, there's this visceral reaction that you have to do something. It's not just on your TV screen, it's in your front yard, your backyard, your streets, your driveways, your grocery store parking lots. And I've been so encouraged by how Minnesota has reacted to this crisis and set an example for other places, hopefully that won't have to deal with these kinds of operations by ICE, but as an example of what peaceful protesting can look like and how people do actually step up during times of need. I've seen this happen across Hawaii during both gray skies and blue skies scenarios. Gray skies is like times of crisis, and blue skies is, just the everyday when things are good. These times of crisis make us realize that we should know each other all the time, not just when things are bad. A few years ago, I read the book Man's Search for Meaning by the author Viktor Frankl, and he was a Holocaust survivor. He had been in a concentration camp, and even though it's like one of the hardest books to ever read through, the resiliency that he displays in just going through the motions and not letting the physical and mental strain break your human spirit and your dignity. He wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's own attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." And this highlights that decision that we have in every single moment of our lives on how we are going to react to something. And even though your circumstances may not be ideal, you do have control over how you react to something, how you choose to be in the world. And that can totally shift everything in your reality. I think for a lot of us who are on our mindfulness journeys and exploring meditation or contemplative prayer, this is the ultimate challenge, is allowing those practices to actually translate in our day-to-day lives. When things are hard, when we're in traffic and we get upset, how do we respond? When things are good and you're like, oh, I don't need to do that practice anymore, keep doing it, because there will be a time, probably in that same day, when you need to take hold of that moment and really own it and pivot into a positive direction. The other day I was flying back from San Diego and I had gone up for a work conference, and it was a work conference about tax credits. So not the most riveting topic, but I was eating at breakfast the other day, and there's a mix of us from all different states, different cities, different roles. And one woman sat at the table and she was like, "Hey, I'm just wondering how everyone is doing. I'm really, really disturbed by what's happening in Minneapolis." And she said that her family had been Holocaust survivors and that she was just seeing so many parallels with what is happening to immigrants and what happened to the Jewish community back in the 1940s, to her own family members, her parents and her grandparents. And usually this kind of political talk doesn't happen at these sorts of conferences. So I sensed the other 5 people at the table squirming because they're like, "Oh, I just don't really want to get into it." There's sort of this underlying denial because we're so dumbfounded in disbelief that this kind of behavior can happen in the modern day by a government of a first world nation. But she went there. She brought the conversation to this very human place, and everyone was just sitting quietly. And I felt also, because my family is from Minnesota, that I needed to just acknowledge her concern and meet her where she was, because we can tiptoe around these things all day, but if we continue to do that forever, we're never going to make the positive change to set the country back on a normal, humane path. So I told her about my family members, letting her know that the people on the ground are really caring, and that people who have never attended protests in Minnesota are attending every single one in sub-zero degree weather because they feel so strongly. They're seeing this destruction happening in their backyard. So that conversation at this conference, it shook me up a little bit because it made me realize how so many of us are complacent and not willing to put our neck out there for our neighbors. But we have to wake up, because this is certainly the time to do so. I know that this is a pretty heavy topic, but I also have some more lighthearted interactions that I've had with my own neighbors over the years that I wanted to share. And back in 2016, through about 2023, I was living in a neighborhood called Makiki, which is really close to the University of Hawaiʻi, close to Manoa and Moʻiliʻili. And I remember that there was the incident where there was a false missile threat that was announced, and that there was a ballistic missile coming to Hawaii. It was at 7 or 8 in the morning on a weekend, and every single person got this text message that incoming ballistic missile, this is not a drill. And I remember sitting on my couch getting that text and just looking outside, and it was this beautiful sunny day. There were birds chirping and butterflies, and everything was calm. And I ran outside onto the sidewalk to see, like, is anybody else getting these alerts? What's happening? And I ran into one of my neighbors, and he also happened to be a coworker of mine. We lived in the same building on different floors. And he's like, hey, yeah, I hear there's just so much chaos down in Waikiki. I don't know if this is real, but maybe go back up to your apartment and just get your things together. Stay put for now and just make yourself safe. So I went back upstairs. I called my mom. She was Googling all around to see if there was like a North Korean missile coming. There's nothing in the news. And so I immediately just started like throwing canned food and water into my bathroom because that was the only enclosed space that didn't have windows. And I was getting ready to hunker down, survive whatever missile was coming my way. But it was like this super weird out-of-body experience. But I think back to that moment, and I'm so glad that I was able to talk to my neighbor, because what else do you do in times of uncertainty? You go to the people that are most conveniently next to you. I could have called anybody in the world, but they would not have been able to help me other than my neighbors. And there's so many other stories I have. Like another time I was getting ready to run an event at a parade. We were walking in a parade. I was working for a public health organization at the time, and we would hand out bananas and oranges instead of candy at all of these holiday parades. And I had just come out of Foodland, this big grocery chain here in Hawaii, and I was pushing this cart with probably like 400 oranges, trying to unload these big cardboard boxes into my little Toyota Yaris. And I dropped one because it was so heavy. And so these dozens of oranges just spilled all over the parking lot. And I started crying because I was so stressed out already. And this super nice man came over and he helped me pick up every single orange that had rolled away. And he's like, hey sis, you got this. Don't worry. I remember that so vividly because I just really needed someone to like show up for me that day. And he came through, and I didn't catch his name, but he was watching out for me. And I really love how most neighborhoods have at least one kupuna or a group of elders who are almost like the unofficial neighborhood watch. And we have one of those aunties in my neighborhood. She literally knows everything that happens on the street. Once in a while, she might come by and bring mangoes for us. So I feel like she's of a different generation where she's actively making these connections during normal days, during the blue sky times. And I love it because she's got our back, and now I always want to update her on things because she's invested, and I'm also invested in her well-being. I had another story that came to mind recently, and it was in high school. I was invited to go on this retreat, I think when I was a sophomore, so I was about 16 or 17 years old, and we did this team bonding activity. It was about historical awareness and building empathy with our immigrant communities, specifically the Hmong community that is in Minnesota. And that's an immigrant group that came from Laos, often through Thailand, during the Secret War, the time of post-Vietnam War, where they were escaping Laos, going through Thailand because they were not welcome anymore. And so the simulation that we did, it was so harrowing and memorable. I actually can't believe that it was even allowed for teenagers or anyone to go through this, but it definitely got the message across for me, and so I'm going to share it here. For the simulation, we had to wait for nighttime. I don't even remember what city we were in, but we went out into the woods, and we were told that our survival depended on us making it to the safe house. We had to pretend that we were Hmong people who were escaping Laos, and that there would be people chasing us who were armed and speaking another language and trying to capture us. And so we're out in the middle of the woods, we're wearing jackets, it's fall weather, can't see anything. And all you know is that the safe house is north, somewhere north, and that there would be people there who would protect you. I'm pretty sure they shot off like a BB gun or something, and then we just had to run for our lives and try to make it to the safe house because these soldiers were coming. And I had no idea what was happening, and I just assumed like, oh, I'm a kid, someone will protect me. But no, everyone just bolted, disappeared into the forest, and I realized I had to protect myself. And I hate the dark, but I ran behind this huge fallen log and hid back there. And there were like 3 of us that had found this same place to hide. And we heard footsteps, and within like 3 minutes, these soldiers had found us, and they grouped us up and made us walk in a line along the stream. And it's nighttime, there's flashlights, and they're holding guns. You have no idea what's happening, you're freezing, you're cold, it's dark, and they're just rushing you to this unknown destination. Our group was about 16 people, and I don't know where everyone else was. Thank goodness the simulation, they just took us directly to the safe house, and another like 35 minutes went by, and 2 other people made it safely without getting captured. And their tactic was to just go off on their own and hide behind trees, wait till it was quiet, and then move again. And so they like very slowly zigzagged their way through the forest to where the lights were shining. It's been 20 years since this happened, and that stuck with me so long because I realized that in these split-second moments of having to make a decision, I freeze. After that experience, I just made this resolute decision that I would never be a bystander because I want other people to feel protected because I didn't feel protected in that moment. There was this other time when I was driving in my neighborhood. I was going to a yoga class, and there was this elderly man who had fallen from his walker. And his sister, who was also in her mid to late 80s, was trying to pick him up off the concrete. And I like pulled my car over, ran over to them, and like held this man up. I stood behind him and wrapped my arms around him so that he wouldn't fall on the ground. It was this really quiet street where you think nobody's home. But immediately, like within the first minute or 2, there were 5 neighbors outside. This young guy ran out of his house and he brought a chair that we could lift this man into. Another woman brought water. There was also this construction guy. He came by in his truck and he parked the truck in the middle of the road, came over and just like totally lifted this elderly man up and helped him walk to his house with the help of his granddaughter. But we were all so shaken up because had nobody stepped outside, this older woman wouldn't have been able to help her brother because she was so tiny and confused, and they just wanted to get out of the house and go on a walk. I'm grateful that I had that opportunity to step in and kind of know what it feels like to take action. But I also hope that we don't have to do all these things only during times of crisis. I just want to leave you with the question, how can you be a good neighbor in 2026? How can we embrace each other, one another's dignity, and inherently know the value of our neighbors, even if we don't know their stories? Mahalo for joining me on this episode. I'm incredibly grateful that you listened to the podcast. I'm always here, and I look forward to catching up with you on the next episode. Aloha.